Hello, bruvs. We're back with Chapter 18 of Near to the Wild Heart by Clarice Lispector. The Man's Departure. The following day, she received a note from the man saying goodbye. I've had to go away for a spell. I had to go. They came to look for me, Joanna. I'll be back. I'll be back. Wait for me. You know that I'm nothing. I'll be back. And I just got a comment on YouTube. Okay. I shouldn't even... I shouldn't even be able to see and hear if it weren't for you. If you abandon me, I'll go on living a little longer. The time a little bird can stay in midair without flapping its wings, then I'll drop. I'll drop from the sky and die, Joanna. The only thing that prevents me from dying this very moment is that I'll be back. I can't explain it, but through you, I'm able to see. God help me and you, for there is no one like you. I'll be back. I never spoke all that much to you, but it was out of kindness. I'm not breaking my promise, am I? I understand you so well, so well. Should you want anything from me, you need only ask. May God bless you. Here's my little medal with Saint Christopher and Saint Teresa of Lisieux. I think that's Lisieux. She folded the note carefully. She recalled the man's face during those last days, his eyes running and bleary like those of a mangy cat, and the skin around them, livid and inflamed like the gloaming. Where had he gone? His life was undoubtedly confused, a confusion of facts, and she had the impression that, in a sense, he was disconnected from those facts. The woman who sustained him, that distraction in relation to himself, like someone who has had no beginning and expects no end. Where had he gone? He had suffered a great deal during those last days. She should have spoken to him. He had truly expected it, but afterwards, distracted and thoughtless, she had forgotten. Where had he gone? She wondered, her arms empty. The whirlwind spun round and set her down once more at the beginning of the road. She looked at the note with its delicate, indecisive lettering, the phrases written with care and difficulty. Once again she could see her lover's face, and she couldn't help admiring those striking features. She closed her eyes for a second, inhaled once more the odor that came from the gloomy corridors of that unexplored house, with only one room revealed where she had experienced love anew. The smell of old apples, sweet and old, coming from the walls, from their depths. Once again, she could see the narrow bed which had been replaced by a large, soft one. The nervous pleasure with which the man had opened the door that day and seen Joanna's face, taking her by surprise. The tiny ship almost submerged by the exceedingly green waves. She half closed her eyes and the ship lurched. But everything had slid over her, nothing had possessed her. In brief, a mere pause, a single note, weak and pure. It was she who had violated the man's soul, who had filled it with a light whose evil he still hadn't fathomed. She herself had scarcely been touched. A pause, a note, faint and without any resonance. Once more a circle of life that was closing, and she herself in Ottavio's tranquil and silent house, sensing his absence, in each place where only the day before his things had still existed, and where there was now a void lightly covered in dust. Fortunately, she hadn't seen him leave, and fortunately, during those first moments, upon noticing her dismay that he had gone, she still believed she possessed her lover. Upon noticing that Ottavio had gone, she thought, but why lie? The person who had gone was herself, and even Ottavio knew it. She changed out of the clothes she had worn to visit the man. That woman with the moist, loose lips must be suffering, alone and old in that big house. Joanna didn't even know his name. She didn't want to know it. She had assured him, I want to know you through other sources, to pursue your soul along other roads. I want nothing of your past life, neither your name nor your dreams, nor to hear of your sufferings. The mystery clarifies more than any revelation, and I forbid you to start probing anything about me. I am Joanna. You are a living body. I am a living body. That's all. What a fool, what a fool. Perhaps she might have tolerated and loved him then had she known his name, been aware of his hopes and sufferings. It's true that the silence between them might have been more perfect, but what was the use? They were simply living bodies. No, no, even better like this, each with a body driving it onwards, eagerly seeking to get the most out of it, avidly trying to climb over the other, pleading, full of cunning and touching cowardice, for a better existence, a better existence. She interrupted herself, holding her dress in one hand, alert and liberated. She became aware of the solitude in which she found herself. At the center of an empty house, she sensed that Ottavio was with Lydia, a fugitive beside that pregnant woman full of seeds for the world. She went to the window, felt the cold air on her bare shoulders, watched the earth where the plants were thriving peacefully. The globe was moving, and she was standing on it. Beside a window, the sky overhead, clear, infinite. It was useless to take refuge in the suffering of every love affair, to rebel against events, for the facts were simply a tear in her dress, the silent arrow pointing to the heart of things, a river that dries up, leaving the riverbed exposed. The chilly night air brought her skin out in goose pimples. Joanna found it difficult to think clearly. There was something in the garden that dislocated her from the center, causing her to waver. She remained on the alert. Something was trying to move inside her, responding, and through the dark cavities of her body, waves came surging, light, fresh, and ancient. Almost frightened, she wanted to bring the feeling to her consciousness, but found herself being pulled further and further back in sweet vertigo by gentle fingers. As if it were morning, she examined herself, suddenly alert, as if she had advanced too far. Morning? Morning! Where had she once been? In what strange and miraculous land had she set foot to be now inhaling its perfume? Dry leaves on the moist ground, her heart slowly contracted, opened. She did not breathe for a moment, waiting. It was morning. She knew that it was morning. Withdrawing as if being led by a child's delicate hand, she heard, muffled as in a dream, chickens scratching at the soil. A warm, dry soil. The clock chimming ping, ping. The sun showering tiny yellow and red roses over the houses. It was chiming, not chimming. God, what was that if not she herself? But when? Not always. The pink waves darkened. The dream fled. What was it that I lost? What was it that I lost? It wasn't Ottavio, already far away. It wasn't her lover. The wretched man had never existed. It occurred to her that the latter must be trapped. She pushed the thought from her mind, impatiently, escaping, rushing headlong. As if everything were part of the same madness, she suddenly heard a nearby cockerel ring out its vigorous and solitary cry. But it isn't daybreak, she said, trembling, smoothing her cold forehead. The cockerel didn't know it was about to die. The cockerel didn't know it was about to die. Yes, yes, Daddy. What is there for me to do? Ah, she had lost the rhythm of a minuet. Yes, the clock had chimed ping. She had stood on tiptoe, and the world had turned much more slowly at that moment. Were there flowers somewhere? And she felt a great desire to melt away until their fibers merged with the beginning of things, to form but one substance, rose-colored and sweet, breathing gently like a rising and falling womb. Or was she wrong, and was that feeling real? Was what existed in that remote instant something green and obscure, the anticipation of continuance, an impatient or patient innocence, empty space? What word could convey just then that something had not condensed and lived more freely? Open eyes floating amidst withering leaves, white clouds, and way down below the countryside stretched out as if it were embracing the earth. And now, perhaps she might have learned to speak, only this. But the words floated on the surface of her impenetrable sea, and they were hard. Before the sea was pure, and all that remained of the past flowing within, light and tremulous, was a little of that ancient water amidst gravel, somber and cool under the trees, and the dead leaves and chestnuts covering the verges. God, how sweetly she plunged into incomprehension of herself, and how much easier still to abandon herself to that ebbing tide, firm and gentle, and to return. She would have to reunite herself to herself one day, without those hard and solitary words. She would have to merge herself and become once more the sea, mute, unruly, powerful, wide, motionless, blind living. Death would unite her with infancy. But the iron gate was made by men, and there it was gleaming beneath the sun. She observed this, and the shock of this sudden perception made her a woman once more. She trembled, lost in a dream. She wanted to go back. She wanted to go back. What was she thinking about? Ah, death would unite her with infancy. But now her eyes, turned outwards, had become cold. Now death was different, since men made the iron gate, and since she was a woman. Death. And suddenly death was merely cessation. No, she cried out in terror, not death. She now ran ahead of herself, already remote from Ottavio and from the man who had disappeared. She mustn't die, for truly, where was the death inside her? She slowly asked herself with cunning. She opened her eyes wide, still not believing in this question, so novel and fascinating, which she had allowed herself to invent. She walked up to the mirror, looked at herself, still alive, her pale neck sprouting from delicate shoulders, still alive, searching for herself. No, listen, listen. The beginning of death did not exist inside her, and as if she were violently pervading her own body, searching, she felt an upsurge of vitality, her whole body opening up to breathe. So she couldn't die. She then thought slowly. Little by little, this fragile thought took a deep breath, expanded, became compact and solid, like a block adapting to its form. There was no space for another presence, no room for doubt. Her heart pounding furiously, she listened carefully. She burst out laughing, a tremulous, bubbling laugh. No, but it was so clear. No, she wouldn't die because she could not end. That was it. That was it. A sudden apparition, that of a little old man, perhaps a woman, several blurred human forms merged into one, shaking its head, denying, growing old. No, she told them quietly from the depths of her new truth. No, the forms gradually faded, for she had always been. For her body had never needed anyone. She was free. She walked through the streets. She drank water. She had abolished God, the world, everything. She would not die. It was so easy. She stretched out her hands, not knowing what to do with them now that she knew. Perhaps she would caress herself, kiss herself, filled with curiosity and gratitude upon recognizing herself, no longer adhering to reason. It seemed to her that it was so illogical to die that she checked herself, now bewildered and filled with terror. Eternal? Violent. The most fleeting reflections. The most fleeting reflections and as brilliant as sparks crisscrossing like electric currents, merging as sensations rather than as thoughts. She altered without transition in tiny leaps from place to place, ever higher, clearer, and more tense. And from one moment to the next, she felt more deeply within herself, into caverns of milky light, breathing loudly, filled with fear and joy because of the journey, perhaps like those sudden descents when one is asleep. The intuition that those moments were fragile made her stir herself gently, fearful of touching herself, of disturbing and dissolving that miracle, the tender creature of light and air who was trying to live inside her. Once more she slipped to the window, breathing cautiously, plunged into a happiness so perfect and intense, almost like the chill of ice, almost like the perception of music. Her lips began to tremble, made her look serious. Eternal, eternal, brilliant and confused. Broad tracts of land the color of chestnuts were succeeded by green, sparkling rivers, coursing with fury and melody. Liquids glowing like flames pouring into her transparent body, as if it were an enormous vessel. She herself growing on the smothered earth, dividing into thousands of living particles, filled with her thoughts, her strength, her unawareness, smoothly crossing the cloudless sky, traveling, flying. A bird flew slanting into the distance. It penetrated the clear atmosphere and disappeared into the dense foliage of a tree. Silence was left behind, palpitating in tiny whispers. How long had she been observing it without feeling anything? Ah, so she would die. Yes, she would die, as simply as the bird had flown. She tilted her head to one side gently, like a harmless, mad woman. But it's easy, so easy, not even intelligent. It's death that will come, that will come. How many seconds had passed? Several, or more. Cold. She perceived that by some miracle she had now become conscious of those thoughts, that they were so deep that they had passed beneath others that were material and easy. Simultaneously, while she had lived the dream, she had observed the things around her. She had used them mentally, nervously, like someone pulling back the curtain to look at the view. She closed her eyes, pleasantly serene and weary, and shrouded in long gray veils. For yet another moment she sensed the threat of incomprehension rising from the remote interior of her body like a flux of blood. Eternity is non-being, death is immortality. They were still floating, the scattered remains after the storm, and she no longer knew where she might secure them. She felt so weary. Now, the certainty of immortality had vanished forever. Perhaps once or twice more in life, perhaps one late afternoon in a moment of love, at the moment of dying, she would achieve sublime creative unconsciousness, the acute and blind intuition that she was truly immortal forevermore. And that's the end of that chapter. The journey awaits us. Goodbye, bruv. Goodbye.